Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to Newsroom. I'm your host, Khalid. But today is Friday, the end of another week, and the 26th of April 2024. And these are the stories that we will be highlighting during the course of the show. We'll begin, ladies and gentlemen, with Antony Blinken's visit to China, a 3-day official visit. Today is normally the last day of his visit, and he has met with many people, whether it be the Chinese President Xi Jinping, whether it be, of course, Foreign Minister Wang Yi, whether it be Chinese State Council and Minister for Public Security Wang Xiaohong. They have all met with Antony Blinken. There have been different statements that have come out after the meetings with the Chinese President as well as the Foreign Minister. What we will try to decipher during our first segment is highlight different elements of those statements in the whole context of the China-US relationship. Will we be seeing some kind of positivity or uptick as far as this relationship is concerned post the visit of Antony Blinken? We should remember that Antony Blinken also visited China in the last year as well. So nothing new as far as the visits of Antony Blinken. What is could be new is a change in the tangent of the relations for the better, and let's hope for that. Our second segment, ladies and gentlemen, concerns the Palestine war, day 203. The eastern part of Rafah is under constant artillery shelling as far as the last reports came in. The United Nations Secretary General spokesperson also says, in the wake of all the mass graves that have been found at Al Nasir and Al Shifa Hospital, that it is important that all forensic evidence be well preserved, although Israel is not complying with the request to do a formal investigation as far as these mass graves is concerned. 34,356 Palestinians have been killed, while 77,368 have been injured so far. This and more will be discussed in our second story. Then we are going to talk about the global treaty to reduce plastic pollution, and of course we all know that negotiators from 175 countries have begun talks since Tuesday on a proposed global treaty to reduce this pollution, which is found everywhere from mountaintops to the oceans to even breast milk and human blood. We'll discuss that with a special guest. And finally, we'll be talking about the United Nations Pakistani peacekeepers who are leaving the Democratic Republic of Congo after a period of 20 years. The contingent has constituted the bulk of the United Nations troops deployed in South Kivu province, and the important contributions to peace and of course security was recognized during a tribute ceremony that was also held today. This will be the part of our segments today and our lineup today. Let's begin with our first segment, and that is the relationship between the People's Republic of China and the United States of America. The visit of Antony Blinken to China, where he's met with the Chinese President, the Chinese Foreign Minister and others. How important is this visit? What are the different details? We'll begin with our first guest, Serena Shudong. She's a reporter from CGTN. She joins us from China. Serena, would you kindly give us some highlights of the visit of Antony Blinken and some details concerning this important visit to China?
As the U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is wrapping up his 3-day visit to China, the two sides reached a 5-point consensus. First, they agreed to continue to work to stabilize and develop the relations under the guidance of the two presidents. Second, cooperation will expand on diplomacy, economics, commerce, drug control, climate change, and artificial intelligence, as the two sides have formed working groups. Third, they agreed to the first meeting of China-US Intergovernmental Dialogue on Artificial Intelligence and a new round of consultations on Asia-Pacific and maritime affairs, and a meeting of the China-US Drug Control Working Group. Fourth, people-to-people exchanges will expand, including each getting more students from the other. Fifth, the two sides will maintain consultations on international and regional hotspot issues. And earlier this afternoon, when Chinese President Xi Jinping met with Blinken at the Great Hall of the People here in the capital, Beijing, President Xi said that China and the U.S. should be partners, not rivals. And instead of hurting each other, the two sides should help accomplish one another, and the two should seek common ground while resolving differences. He also mentioned 3 principles of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, cooperation, and win-win, which according to President Xi are not only a summary of the past experience experience, but also a guide to the future for the relations. He went on and said that strengthening communication, managing differences, and promoting cooperation is not only the hopes of the two peoples, but also the expectations of the global community. The planet is big enough, he said, to accommodate the common development and respective prosperity of China and the United States. And China is happy to see a confident, open, prosperous, and thriving United States. We hope, President Xi said, that the U.S. can also look at China's development in a positive light.
Thank you so very much, Serena Shudong, you're a correspondent from the CGTN, the Chinese channel, to have joined us and to have given us details about the visit of Anthony Blinken so far in the People's Republic of China, as well as details regarding his visit and his meeting with the Chinese President Xi Jinping. We've been joined by two guests for further discussing on this issue. One is in the studios, one is online. In the studios, we've been joined by Shakeel Ramay. He's a senior analyst. Shakeel, thank you very much to have joined us. And online, we've been joined by Dr. Salma Malik. She's a foreign affairs expert. Dr. Salma, thank you also to have joined us. We'll begin with Shakeel. Shakeel, President Xi Jinping, when he meets with the Secretary Anthony Blinken, not the first time that they have met, they also met in June last year. They talk about the tangent of relationship over the last 45 years and the different changes, positive or otherwise, that have formed part of this relationship, and a number of important inspirations to offer. He says China and the US should be partners rather than rivals. They should help each other succeed rather than hurt each other. They should seek common ground and reserve differences rather than engage in vicious competition, and honor words with actions rather than say one thing but do the opposite. Do you think such statements will be reciprocated from the US side?
Thank you, Omar. I think if we look at the statements, these are not new statements. So China is very consistent in its stance. So China is asking the US for a long time, be respectful and give us space to develop. Don't look at our development as a negative. So these are not new statements. And the second part of the question, I think I can explain it in a better way if we look this issue with a two lens. Number one, tech war. What is happening between China and US right now? The basic, the fundamental bone of contention is technology. If you look at that during the last few years, China has developed marvelously. China is, you can say, developing leaps and bounds. And US does not want, so China surpass USA. But China has surpassed. And this is the same thing when the President, Donald Trump was the President, he officially said in a press conference, we don't want any country to surpass us in the future technology development and economic opportunities. And technology is a key. And if you look at the last 2 or 3 years when the Mr. Biden is in the power, they have introduced many bills like science and chip bill. Then again, they have a banned Chinese company and asked the American company, don't sell the modern technology and the chip to the USA, China. But on the other hand, China is developing, as I told you. Recently there was a ranking, there was you can say not ranking, you can say the state of technologies. So there are the 44 most critical technology, and from those 44 critical technologies, China was leading in 37, including artificial intelligence, compound computing, in energy, in biotechnology, in number of things. So China is clearly winner right now. So 37 from 44. Only 7 technology was there where the US was leading. Second, coming to the, so this is one part, technological war. So China, as US wants China not to develop, which is, I think, is not a reasonable, a justifiable demand. So that's why China, President Xi Jinping told them, so be respectful to our development. Second part, US is struggling to keep intact its hegemony. And any hegemony, it has 3 indicators. Number one, diplomatic power. If we have seen in the recent past, in the last, especially the last 2 or 3 years, so US is losing the diplomatic power. at General Assembly, especially after the Israel attack on Palestine, and also on the human rights allegations on China. So they have lost the confidence of his partner. So many countries did not vote in the favor of US. So China is winning there, the Palestine is winning there. So diplomatic might, which US enjoyed once, is not there anymore. Second indicator is economy, and China is there in big way. So US is not like that. When you look at the data from the last, from 2019 onward till today, from pre-COVID to today, Chinese economy expanded by 20%, and US economy expanded by 6%. So there is a clear edge. So China is moving quite fast, and technology we have already discussed. The third indicator is the military, where the US is still strong, and US is showing trying to show its muscles and engage like in Ukraine, and then as Mr. Blinken was coming to China, and President Biden has signed a bill which has specific allocations of $8 billion to deal with the China power, plus billions of dollars to support Taiwan, in addition to the 61 billion with the Ukraine. So if you look around, these are the military spending. On one side, where the US says we want good relationship, but on the other side, they are provocating. They are banning Chinese companies. Even TikTok, the owner or CEO of that company is a Singaporean, but still they are banning it with the allegation of China. They are allocating billions of dollars to fight with China, or to create a circle of chaos in the surrounding of China, and then they say we want to build a good relationship. So there is the answer of your question. Reciprocation.
Therein lies the dilemma, Shakeel, doesn't it? Dr. Salma, thank you very much to have joined us. Now, I'd like to again refer to some statements that President Xi Jinping made today while talking to Anthony Blinken, and he said that he proposed mutual respect, which has also Shakeel has talked about, peaceful coexistence and win-win cooperation to be the three overarching principles. These are both lessons learned from the past and a guide for the future, he said. In the shared desire of both the two peoples and the international community to see China and US strengthen dialogue, manage differences and advance cooperation, the planet is big enough to accommodate the common development and respective prosperity of both China and the United States. China is happy to see a confident, open, prosperous and thriving US, and he said, and I quote, we hope the US can also look at China's development in a positive light. How do you see these statements from a geostrategic point of view?
Assalamu alaikum, Omar. Thank you so much for having me in your program. The 3 points that you have raised are nothing new. They are part of China's Panchila, or the five-pronged, traditional five-pronged diplomacy model, where they talk about cooperation, they talk about mutual uplift, they talk about non-intervention, non-interference, as well as the fact that they want to be partners in peace rather than being conflictual actors. And this is something that China has always reiterated. The US never takes it seriously, and a few of the gestures that China has done to protect its territory and its interests, which the US overemphasizes and over-manifests, especially in the South China Sea, are taken as aggressive actions. But the very fact is that China has never really entered into a conflictual behavior full-time the way the US wants, despite all the provocation. So these three elements have been offered now. They were offered before as well, and they have been repeatedly done so by the Chinese side because they want to have mutual cooperation and development. And the very fact that you have a planet big enough to accommodate two powers is a very powerful statement coming from China, in a sense that they don't want to enter into a conflictual relationship, rather than go for shaking hands and looking at development, because China is on an economic growth path, and it does not want its economy to suffer as a result of conflict, as a result of having negative sanctions. But then when we look at the USA, its insecurity happens because of the two aspects. Number one, USA is not attuned to the type of strategic behavior China is showing. that of cooperation rather than conflict, despite being a country which is on the power projection and power growth path. And this is something that makes the USA keep wondering as to should they really believe China or not, because what they know is the language of conflict only and language of competition. And here you have a country which is on the rise, which has risen, which has arrived, yet it does not want to curtail the growth pattern of another country as well. How can that happen? And that is what keeps the U.S. really surprised and really stressed out. So that's actually a very fascinating thing to see, that a growing power and a risen power is actually telling another established power that feels comfortable with us because our growth is going to complement your growth and development rather than curtail it. So if the U.S. understands these things, this can actually mean a lot of growth and development for the entire world. And it's not only the economic growth and development. China has very tacitly, very slowly, gradually evolved itself in different areas. It has also offered diplomacy. So it's a multi-pronged approach that China is doing.
It's a multi-pronged approach. Let's hope that this multi-pronged approach, falls to ears that understand the consequences for the region, for the world, and for bilateral relations between the US and China. Thank you very much, Dr. Salma, to have joined us. Coming back to you, Shakeel, Wang Yi, the Chinese foreign minister, when he met with Anthony Blinken, he said that under the leadership of the two heads of state, China-US relations have stabilized from further deterioration, and bilateral dialogue, cooperation, and positive aspects in various fields have increased, which is welcomed by the two peoples and the international community. On the other hand, he says China-US relations are still facing increasing negative factors and various disruptions, adding that China's legitimate development rights are being unreasonably suppressed. That is something you have alluded to as well. And China's core interests have been constantly challenged. Quoting him, shouldn't China and the US stick to the right path of stability or repeat the mistake of a downward spiral? That is a major issue facing both countries, which tests the sincerity and capability of both sides.
So, if we look people-to-people connection, as the same voices from the China and USA, so people are happy interacting with each other. So people in the US, they are used to have a good quality and the cheap products from China. And due to the ban on these different types of the bans and these things, the prices of different products are increasing in USA. With the, who is being affected? Common man on one side, and due to the tech challenge and the tech war, so many American companies, they are losing the business. Because if you put a ban on China in the chip, so China has the rare earth metals. Right now, say the 60% extraction of rare earth metals is happening in China. 85% processing of rare earth metal is happening in China, which is vital for the making the chips. If China put a ban, so what will be the consequence and what will be the consequences? So people and their lower level business communities, they are happy to interact with China. But the real problem is military industrial complex of US, which is more interested in hegemony rather than the development of people or the country. They want to do anything to keep intact their hegemony. And in China, they have a problem because in any other country, part of the world or the country, they introduce the human rights, they introduce the liberal democracy. At the name of the democracy, they pitch one party against other party, and they introduce the color revolution like that. In China, they cannot do anything because there is the CPC, the sole you can say responsible party for China, and they cannot do anything, color revolutions or these things. That's why if you look at these propaganda, they continuously target CPC, Communist Party of China, because they think if they were able to control CPC, they will be able to control the China, but that is not happening. So people are happy to strengthen their relationship because it's beneficial.
It's win-win for everybody.
Win-win for everybody. And China is also looking for that because China is also, they don't want to lose a big market. And from the market, people don't want to lose the quality and the cheap products. So it is a win-win proposition. The problem is military industrial complex. We have seen it many times. In case of the Ukraine, what is happening? In case of the Palestine, where is the human rights? Leave alone the human rights, where is the lives of the human? How they are killing them? Are they concerned about that? No. They are only concerned about their hegemony and the might, what might they enjoy. That they want to enjoy in the case of China. They want to contain China, so they can keep intact their hegemony. That will not happen, because if you look at the data and the analysis of the history, so every empire do other things like the US doing. So, they want to be powerful in one way and another way, like the Thyssen trap. So, who attacked the other power? That was the existing superpower attacked the rising power. They do not believe that they can be defeated. Actually, they can, anybody compete them. Not a defeat is a very strong word. They cannot believe, so any country can compete them. So, that is the main problem which they are not ready to accept. I think the sane voices in US is pushing for the through their people and their politicians accept the reality. Let us work together, because then one thing is for sure, Omar, if there is any hard conflict, no one will be the winner. US did many times the war games. Many times they have the war games. In every war game, they find that they cannot defeat China.
That is true. Finally, last question, and let's set on a kind of positive note. More than 20 institutional consultations have been established or restarted after the meeting between the two heads of state in San Francisco. And they have continued to operate. How important is it for both countries, in your point of view, to let their doors for dialogue and communication, despite the differences that they have, as have also been mentioned by different sectors and different statements, whether it be Taiwan, trade, science and technology, South China Sea, and of course the unilateral sanctions on some Chinese companies that you have alluded to. How important is for both countries to still let their doors open for dialogue and communication?
I think that is the most important thing, because if the door of communications are closed, there is all chances of misperception and miscalculations, that the Foreign Minister Blinken has said. So, there are all chances of the misperception and miscalculations.
All right.
Communication is very vital.
Okay.
And there are some communication channels which are working, and the groups like climate change, artificial intelligence, they are quite working. But on the climate change, maybe there is a challenge if President Donald Trump come to the power, as he does not believe in the climate change. But communication is a prerequisite and the most required step, and it is good for the China and the USA and for the world, because it provides an opportunity to diffuse the situation.
All right. Thank you so very much, Shakeel Ahmed Ramay, to have joined us, and somebody who is an expert in China and Chinese affairs. We couldn't have had a better guest than you to talk about this important visit of Anthony Blinken to China and what could ensue out of it. Let's stay positive, let's stay cautiously optimistic, and let's hope that despite the differences, both countries can jointly work together and stabilize not only the region but also the world in different spheres. Thank you very much, Shakeel, to have joined us. Let's come to our second story, and that concerns the Palestine-Israel conflict, day 203. A lot is happening, whether it be the number of casualties that are increasing, whether it be the incursions on Rafah and the possible ground invasion on Rafah as well, whether it be the different international modalities or efforts that are going on but seem to fall on deaf ears, whether it be the different universities across the United States of America and in different parts of the world that are protesting, and those protests are increasing, and around more than 500 have been arrested since these protests began from the United States alone. Are we seeing a Vietnam-like situation re-emerging in the United States of America? What consequences is going to have on the US and on the region? We've been joined by Osama Muhammad Nazzal. He's a Palestinian journalist, and he joins us from Jenin. Osama, thank you very much to have joined us. Osama, my first question pertains to the United States that says that it's going to start construction very soon on a pier to boost deliveries of desperately needed aid to Gaza. This was said by the Pentagon. All the necessary vessels are within the Mediterranean region and standing by. This is what the spokesman said. We are positioned to begin construction very soon. Wouldn't a land route have been better as far as the supply of aid to Palestine is concerned? That is the fastest route instead of using alternate routes. And can't the US easily, pressurize Israel as well to facilitate aid through the land routes?
Thank you very much for having me, first of all. Really, the American resolution to build the Gaza pier has been an Israeli initiative because the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu announced the intention of the Israeli occupation government to have such a pier in Gaza. And we feel that the Americans are implementing the dictations and the visions of the Israeli occupation officials, because the Palestinians in Gaza don't need a pier in order to have the humanitarian aid in. There are different crossings, like the Rafah crossing between Egypt and Gaza. There are crossings between what is called Israel today, the Palestinian land occupied in 1948, and Gaza. And they can flow the humanitarian aid through these crossings into the Gaza Strip. But really the Palestinians have concerns about this pier because it feels like the Americans are trying to facilitate the implementation of the Israeli colonial plan, which is to keep the Gaza Strip out of the Palestinian citizens, to keep pressing the Palestinians inside Gaza without food, without water, without the schools, without the clinics and hospitals, and homeless, as most of the houses of Gaza people were bombarded by the Israeli bombs and shellings, and almost all the people in Gaza homeless nowadays, living in tents or on the rubble of their houses. So this pair seems to be within the Israeli plan to keep the people of Gaza out of Gaza, to force them to get out of Gaza. So the Israeli occupation prime minister talked about what he named a voluntary departure, which is, of course, there is no voluntary displacement. It is forced displacement, but instead of being through the bombs and the shellings, okay, we make the situation unbearable, uninhabitable, and then the people have no choice but to leave. This is one of the concerns that the Palestinians have about this pair, and this is not the solution for the root problem. The root problem is the occupation. If the Americans are serious about stability in Palestine and the region as a whole, they have to solve the root cause of the problem. The root cause of the problem, my brother, is the Israeli occupation. And the Israeli occupation of the Palestinian land, East Jerusalem, the West Bank, and Gaza, according to the UN resolutions that classify the land occupied in 1967 as occupied land, and then you won't see all this siege and all this violence and all this death. But the Americans are not serious about that, and they are sticking to their colonial scheme that is support Israel until the end.
Before I come to the internal affairs of the US, let's talk about the destruction that has been caused in Gaza, in the West Bank. The eastern part of Rafah is constantly under artillery fire by the Israeli government. 7 months almost have passed, and we see 34,356 Palestinians brutally killed. On top of that, we see the mass graves that have been unearthed at the Al-Shifa and the Al-Nasser hospitals. Around 390 graves have been unearthed, and the United Nations and the EU have been requested to initiate a proper inquiry as to to ascertain the reason behind the discovery of these mass graves. And of course, Israel is not helping in that as well. You add to that what has been happening in the West Bank, where more and more land is being occupied by Israel in the West Bank. As far as the Israeli settlement watchdog Peace Now is concerned, this year has already broken a record for most land grabs in the West Bank. That has often led to the expansion of settlements. 10,971 dunams of land in the occupied West Bank have been now, taken by Israel. You add to that the fact that the people even today on Friday are not allowed to pray properly in the Al-Aqsa Mosque. There is a limitation on the age. Only people of a certain age can enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. A lot of people were not allowed to enter, but Israeli settlers are openly allowed to enter the Al-Aqsa Mosque. I want to understand the whole global perspective or Western perspective vis-a-vis all of this destruction and death that has occurred.
Yeah. With regard to the issue of Rafah and the Israeli plan to start a fully fledged invasion into the Palestinian city of Rafah, southern Gaza, the situation is not going to be different from what exactly happened to the Palestinians in the north and the middle of Gaza. Israel killed over 34,000 Palestinians. We have more than 7,000 who are still under the rubble, and surely they are dead now under the rubble. Israel injured more than 76,000 Palestinians, in addition to razing almost 70% of the buildings to the ground. So the scenario and the tragedy and the catastrophe that Israel inflicted on the Palestinians in the north and the middle of Gaza is going to be the same in Rafah, but with more casualties, really, because we talk about 1.5 million Palestinians living in tents now in Rafah. Rafah is the most overcrowded city on the planet these days, as almost all the people from the north and the middle immigrated or they were displaced and pushed into Rafah. So it's going to be a disaster. And it sounds that it is for granted because the Americans, the Europeans, the whole world did not take any tangible action to stop the Israeli genocide campaign for 7 months, killing, as I mentioned, thousands and thousands. And what we hear now, only statements, but no action to stop the expected Israeli invasion into Rafah. So this is a disaster implemented by Israel, but supported directly by the Americans and some European countries financing and weapons, and by the Arab and Muslims silence. And this is heartbreaking. When it comes to the West Bank, it's not much different really from what's happening to Gaza. What's happening to Gaza is forced displacement, expulsion of the Palestinians from Gaza. In the West Bank, it is pushing the Palestinians out by imposing restrictions on the roads, restrictions on the licensing of buildings in the Palestinian villages and towns. Palestinians are not allowed to build or to cultivate in more than 62% of the occupied West Bank, in addition to the isolation of the city of Jerusalem from its Palestinian sphere. And just today, the Israeli occupation court approved of removing 3 Palestinian families from the Sheikh Jarrah neighborhood in the heart of the occupied city of Jerusalem and expanding the Israeli colonial settlements within the sphere of the Palestinian city of Jerusalem, in addition to preventing the Palestinians from having access to the Holy Al-Aqsa Mosque, while allowing the settlers to do whatever they like inside the mosque, and also the extremist rightist groups that threaten of having the animal offerings inside the mosque. So Israel has a full comprehensive colonial plan in Gaza, the West Bank, and Jerusalem, because Israel does not believe in the right of the Palestinian people to exist in Palestine. They are working on the plan of a transfer and they are implementing it without having any deterrent force, because the Americans are paying $61 billion to the current Israeli occupation government. The Europeans have the neighborhood policy and the trade agreement with Israel and no boycott at all.
All right. Finally, how do you see these pro-Palestinian protests that have erupted in dozens of universities in the United States of America, in Australia, in the United Kingdom, even in Paris, in France, in one of the major universities? You name it, and the biggest universities in the US have had protests. If you look at the arrests, around 550 arrests have been made from the US alone in the last week by the police, who have also now started to push these students and the faculty back. If we go back a little back in history, we know that around the Vietnam Wars there was also such protest that began in universities, and it had a huge impact on the political structure at that time. What impact could it have this time on the mindset, the politics or the politicking of the US, the European Union and Australia?
Yeah. These demonstrations that are organized by the American students within the key American universities are of high importance and value, because this shows that the cause of Palestine is once again on the agenda of all international relevant organizations and the student syndicates and unions, as these students reveal the ugly face of their governments that claim democracy but support colonialism and oppression against the weakened peoples and nations around the world, and at the same time show that solidarity is getting more and more momentum in the United States and in other countries around the world with the people of Gaza and the people of Palestine. And this takes us back to how the apartheid regime of South Africa collapsed. It collapsed because of this international solidarity, and this is an introduction into the collapse of the Zionist apartheid regime that is being entrenched by the Israeli occupation government in Palestine. And I think that it is stronger than what happened during the Vietnamese War, because we need to remember that the protest against the Vietnamese War was because of the many American soldiers that were killed during that period. So the American students were protesting the killing of their American soldiers. Today they are protesting the Israeli genocide and the mass murder of the Palestinian children and the Palestinian women and youth in Gaza and the occupied West Bank. And this is a very promising step that gives the Palestinians hope that there is going to be an international student movement and not to be limited to the United States only, in order to press the international governments and parliaments to boycott Israel, to pressure Israel, and to give it the two options: either stop genocide, end occupation, or boycott and international isolation.
Thank you so very much, Osama Muhammad Nazzal, to have joined us from Jenin to discuss the latest as far as day 203. And you can imagine 203 days have passed since this war, this genocide, this crimes against humanity have begun by Israel. And let's hope that some kind of positivity comes in the days to come. We need to stay cautiously optimistic and not be pessimistic about it. Let's hope and let's pray together for Palestine to be free of all Zionism. Thank you very much, Osama, to have joined us. Let's go to our third segment, and that concerns the global plastic treaty that has begun in Canada since Tuesday. And of course, negotiators from 175 nations have begun talks on a proposed global treaty to reduce plastic pollution, which is found everywhere, from mountain tops to ocean depths, in human blood, in breast milk, and so many other places. The world is counting on all these organizations of these different countries to deliver a new treaty that could catalyze and guide the action and international cooperation needed to deliver a future that is free of plastic pollution. Nations in the year 2022 had agreed to finalize a world-first treaty by the end of 2024, and we are almost at the end of 2024, well, in the middle of 2024, with concrete measures to battle plastic pollution across the world. This meeting in Ottawa is considered crucial, and it is the penultimate session before a final round of negotiations will begin in South Korea later this year. Plastics, of course, we know have created a reliance on disposable consumer culture. And of course, all the people that are here in Ottawa are there because they recognize that we must throw away this throwaway generation. They need to also acknowledge the fact that we cannot choose between recycling, banning or innovation. We have to do all three in order to deal with plastic pollution. We've been joined by Neil Tangri, the Science and Policy Director at the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives. Neil is here, of course, to discuss some critical insights on plastic offsetting credits and neutrality claims. Neil, thank you very much to have joined us. Could you explain what plastic credits are? And of course, how they're supposed to make a company plastic neutral. I like the word plastic neutral, though. What are the main problems with the system according to your report?
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here. So plastic credits are a credit that is bought and sold, by which, as you were saying, companies claim to be plastic neutral while they continue to use and sell plastic products and packaging. So, for example, you will see where I shop, sometimes you will go and you'll pick up some food item that's packaged in plastic, and it will say this item is plastic neutral. And I'm looking at it thinking, I'm holding the plastic in my hand. What could that possibly mean, plastic neutral? What that means is that they have weighed the amount of plastic that they use, and they have bought a credit from some company that says somewhere in the world somebody has picked up that same amount of plastic and taken it off of a beach or out of a stream, or perhaps intercepted it before it got to that stream. And therefore, in their calculus, there's no harm from the plastic in my hand because somewhere else harm is being reduced. It's a bizarre notion. It kind of contradicts the reality that you're actually buying more plastic and producing more plastic. But it's a desperate attempt by companies that are responsible for this flood of plastic pollution to say, it's not us. It's not on us. It's not our responsibility because we have paid a waste picker or somebody somewhere else to clean up an equivalent amount of plastic halfway around the world.
But it is their responsibility, Neil, at the end of the day. It is a responsibility of all the organizations that are producing plastic. Your report suggests that plastic offsetting schemes are mostly used by companies to appear environmentally friendly while continuing to use plastics. How, in your point of view, do these schemes affect the poorer countries or the developing countries that deal with waste from the richer countries?
Sure. So we have a flood of plastic waste really all over the world, but it is perhaps most obvious in the developing countries where waste management systems simply are not equipped to deal with all of this fast consumption waste that has been introduced mostly by multinational corporations that have displaced local food sources and have brought with them all of this plastic manufacturing, all this plastic use. And the companies are feeling a lot of pressure right now because their brands are out there. This organization, Break Free from Plastic, has done a remarkable brand audit all over the world to find out whose waste is actually ending up in the streams and in the parks and on the beaches. And the companies are feeling the heat. So this is a way of saying, trying to get out of their responsibility. And the effects on developing countries are quite severe. It's not just the cleanup costs. It's not just that it looks bad on the beach. We're talking about impacts on the fisheries, the fishing industry. We're talking about impacts on tourism. And of course, when the plastic accumulates in drains and gutters, it causes flooding, particularly during the monsoon season. And then what is perhaps more insidious, most insidious, but we don't see, is the effects on health. So plastic breaks down into the environment into microplastics and nanoplastics. These enter the food stream, they get into our bodies, they're into our water supply, they're into our food supply, and they have been associated with a huge range of health impacts from heart disease to Parkinson's disease.
I'm going to cut you short, Neil. I have to cut you short. We have a last question and I'd like a short and concise answer to that. What are, in your point of view, better ways to reduce plastic use that actually, in reality, address pollution and fairness issues, unlike plastic offsetting or plastic credits?
Sure. We need to stop using so much plastic. That is very clear. But the consumers often do not have the choice. So we need to stand up new companies that are offering refill and reuse options. We need to go back to those older methods in some cases, or invent newer methods. You know, you have your steel lunch dabbas. Sometimes we still have these methods, but we need to look at reuse and refill systems. There's a huge range of economic opportunities there.
All right. Thank you so very much, Neil. That was Neil Tangri, the Science and Policy Director at the Global Alliance for Incinerator Alternatives, joining us and talking to us about plastic pollution and what needs to be actually done. Last story, ladies and gentlemen, concerns United Nations Pakistan peacekeepers who are leaving the Democratic People's Republic of Congo after more than 20 years of service. The Democratic Republic of Congo is the place where Pakistan has had the most of peacekeepers for a longest period of time, and they have really contributed as far as the peace initiatives of the United Nations is concerned. The departure of the Pakistani contingent is part of MONUSCO's disengagement plan from the Democratic Republic of Congo that was initiated earlier in January 2024. Since 2003, when they were first deployed, more than 100,000 Pakistani peacekeepers have served in South Kivu and 31 have died in the line of duty. The Pakistani troops have been engaged in military operations also that have been aimed at protecting civilians and maintaining peace and security in South Kivu. They were there in 2017, they were there in 2018, and of course they have protected millions of IDPs, many of whom have established camps around their bases. We need to highlight and we need to draw the attention towards all the sacrifices that have been made by the Pakistani contingents, and of course this has been highlighted also and recognized by the United Nations. With that, ladies and gentlemen, we come to an end of today's newsroom. It's Friday. Have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you inshallah on Monday with news stories segments that pertain to you, us in Pakistan. Allah Hafiz.